there I am. Hello. So for those that are wondering, what do we need? You'll want 2 containers of water. One is just to keep clear, so you have clean water when we need to put that on our brush. And the second one is to rinse our brushes off. It's going to get a little bit muddy during the class. You'll also want to have on hand some paper towel and some brushes. So I have anywhere from I have one brush that's an angle brush, and sometimes I pull that brush out. It's quite handy to have. And then I've got some smaller brushes. I think this one is the biggest one I have is a 6, and then they run down to a number 1. So they're just a pointed brush with the exception of this one angle brush. And of course paints. And the paints that were on the listing were blue. So you can use whatever variation of blue you like. Ochre, which is ochre. If you haven't used ochre before, it's like a brown yellow mix, but more yellow than brown. And green, we'll mix and match some of the brown in with our green, or if you don't have a green color, blue and yellow makes green. So we'll mix and match and make lights and darks of those colors. And brown, it's not a deep brown, so it's actually even a watered down brown. If you look at the picture, it's not dark brown. Only in some places we've made for shadows using brown, maybe mixing a bit of green with it just to give us a little bit darker color. So we're going to play with some colors today. So I hope you're excited about that. Do I prime before painting? No, this is watercolor, so it's just a paper. Sometimes we would wet the whole canvas, but in this case, we're not going to. We want to direct the paint where it's going. So if we primed the whole canvas, the whole paper, we really wouldn't have near as much control because it would just start to fan and feather out through the whole page. So at this point, no, we're not priming. And this is a watercolor class. We're just going to go step by step. So some people are used to just throwing the colors on there and going crazy with it. And if that's your style, please feel free to do that. This class will take you through step by step, one piece at a time. Sometimes I move from one piece of the paper onto a different paper to allow it to dry. So I don't like I don't always like it to be all blending together. So we're trying to control a little bit with this picture. So this is the picture. Really, it's just the outline of the trees with a little bit of shading in there. And then this is just some grasses, a little bit of grasses. I think I also asked to have a gift card or a credit card, one that's used. I've got one here that's I just put a line through it so I know it's empty. And then I don't let them keep it at the store. After I use it, I bring it back home because I use these for grasses and things. So we'll use the edge just to make some really cool grasses, and you'll see how that will work during the class. You can also make some nice marks in your trees just by using a little edge. You could do it with a brush, but this is just a fun technique that works as well. When I start, I'd like just to say hello again to everybody that's on board. Thank you so much for coming on board and trusting me with your creative ability and guiding you through. The numbers are getting bigger, and I appreciate maybe one person is telling another. So if you do like my art and you want to share it, please feel free to tell people. If they email, we'll put them on the list. If you did not receive this diagram, then you can email me directly. We'll put you on the list, and every Saturday you'll receive the picture that we're going to paint and the instructions, what you need, and a sketch. So welcome if it's your first time, and thank you back for all those that have stayed with me all this time. I so appreciate it. So with that, I like to get into art mode. So I like to take 3 deep breaths and really, really take a deep breath, really fully fill your lungs up. when you release that breath at the top, just hold it for a second and then release that breath. Find something to smile about in the room. It'll make you feel good, make you feel warm inside. So first deep breath in and hold it and smile and release. Just really step out of your comfort zone. If you're not used to doing that, don't worry about who's around. Just let's get into art mode. So second deep breath in and hold it for a second and release. And a third deep breath in and release. And with that done, let's get going on our art. So we have our picture up. You have the sample of the picture we're going to do, and we're going to start, and we will go through just one step at a time, but we're going to start with our blue. So remember that this is just a piece of paper. Please, if it's not exactly as you would like, try it again. Don't give up. But sometimes a piece of paper doesn't want to accept the paint the way you want to put it on. It's not your fault, it's about the paper. So I'm going to start with my largest brush, which is number 6 pointed brush, soft bristles, fairly soft. It's not a hard bristle brush. I'm just going to dip my brush into my water and tap it off on the paper towel, and I'm going into my blue. So I'm choosing a color called cobalt blue. You can choose cerulean blue, aquamarine blue, whatever color blue you have. It doesn't need to be anything specific. But with the cobalt blue, I'm going to paint the top part right down to that clump of bushes. And I can go right over those trees. And I'm doing wet paint on dry. And because it's watercolor paint, you will be able to see through. You'll be able to see through the paint or through the paint to the pencil that you put on there. Sorry about that. I'm just thinking on the fly here. So I can paint right over those trees because I'm going to paint those trees anyways. And I'm only going down as far as where those trees stop. So all this is the sky behind our trees. So this is a little bit of a misty scene in the forest. This section, we are not painting. So I'm not painting this section. That will create the look of mist. So I'm only painting the trees on the right-hand side. And if you did paint in there already, if you use your paper towel, just dampen it a little bit, wring it out. If you painted already and you want to remove that while it's still wet, you can do that just by using the paper towel. It will lift off any excess paint that you don't want. So you can see already I've lightened that just by using a dampened paper towel. So watercolor is very, it's an easy medium that way that you can move things around. And you can see that I've got some lights and some darks. It's not all even. It's not all about being even. It's just about putting on a background color. We're doing wet on dry, right over top of the drawing that you've done, only on 1/2 or 2/3, leaving this section in the center white. And it's perfectly acceptable in watercolor to leave white on a canvas. If we were doing acrylic, we would paint the white on. So now we're going to work on the far side and put in blue. We're going to do the same thing, but a little bit lighter. You want to change that tone. This is dark sky, and this is a little bit in the hazy section, so just a little bit lighter. So it doesn't look like much of anything right now, except some blue and some lines covered over with some blue. But we will build. We will work on one section and another section and another section and give pieces time to dry. So if you're painting and trying to finish off one section before you move to the next, and you're finding you're getting blurring or you're getting starring or feathering in between, if you put color on and it starts to get a little messy and then you're trying to fix it, it's easiest if you let things dry, go somewhere else, and just move around the painting a little bit at a time as it dries. Watercolor dries fairly quickly, so it's just a matter of a little bit of patience. We're still working wet on dry, so that means that the canvas is dry and the paint is wet. If it were wet on wet, the canvas would be wet, and we would be putting the wet paint on top of that as well. So the next color that I have is a raw umber. So it's a brown. It's a light brown. And I'm going to start to paint my foreground. So I'm not painting all of the foreground, just half of that little oval that you put, that you would have drawn. And then right down to the bottom. So I'm leaving some white in here. This is sort of, some of the trees are shading. So we've got a little bit of shadowing in here and a little bit of earth. So I'm going right down to the bottom with this raw umber. It's fairly watered down. And I want to take it right to the outer corner. Okay, it's still fairly watered. I'm not looking for a deep dark color. I want it to look like a path. And where I have, because I'm on an easel, and I'm not sure how many of you are working with an easel, but because I'm on an easel, I have a little bit of pooling at the bottom. And so I'm just going to very gently run my paper towel along the bottom, slightly underneath my page, just to pick up that excess. Paint's naturally going to run down. And I'm switching from my number 6 brush to a number 3 brush. So it's still a pointed brush, my number 3 brush. You can't see that because it's worn off. Actually, I think it's a number 2 brush. And I'm going to start to create a little bit of my forest on the right-hand side. So you could use whatever green you have if you want to switch greens, add multiple greens for different depth. But I'm going to start to create my forest at this area here. So I'm using Hooker's green, and I'm just doing just the look of some grasses. And I've got lights and darks in there. So I'm just going, just sort of odd lines, just along that line that's drawn. So I'm not trying to fill in the whole area, just the look of some grasses. But I want a variety of colors of looks of my grass. So my Hooker's green is dark green, or this color green. And I'm going into my ochre. If you don't have ochre, yellow will do the same job for what we're going to do. So I've got ochre, and I'm going to blend them together. So it's a little bit of playing with color. So see how that's really limey green? So I'm going to use that color in between some of my lines. So I'm building and creating the look of different colors in my forest floor. So the one color I was using was ochre. And if you don't have ochre, yellow and brown will make an ochre color. And the other color was Hooker's green. There's lots of different greens. There's sap green. There's quite a variety of greens. If I was to use sap green, my sap green is a deeper color. So going into my sap green, I'm going to add some more detail, just building on the floor of my grasses on the right-hand side. So I'm not into anything in the center at this point. I'm only working in this one area to really build this up. I can use just plain ochre in a couple of spots just to give a nice flash of color. And I can take it right to the edge. So play with the colors. We're just filling in this section. And because we're putting wet color on top of wet color on top of wet color, it will start to blend a little bit. And just trust in your ability, trust in the paints to flow to give you that beautiful look. And I'm going to go back into my ochre because it's faded a little bit, and I want to pick that color up again just to give that brightness in the forest. So let's leave that little section and go to this line that we've got in the center of our page. And with sap green, I'm just going to draw a line. Now we will come back and we'll do some more work on this section. So not to think we're finished here, but we're just going to let a little bit of that dry. And we're just doing a sap green line right across that line that you would have drawn. And if it's not wet enough, you can go back on and put a little bit of fresh sap green. And with our card, with your card, I draw the line. With your card, you're going to use the edge or the corner of your card and just pull up a little bit of grass. So you can practice on a little piece of paper if you don't want to hit your canvas right away. We're just putting on, just with the corner of our card, I'm just going to just pull up a few grasses. And remember that grass doesn't grow straight. Sometimes it crosses over another blade. And as you're pulling, sometimes you get those really nice white spaces in between. They're beautiful. They will add to your picture. So we're not looking for the perfect lawn here. This is a forest. But we also want to bring that together. So with a little bit of that sap green and a little bit of our ochre, it's going to mix a little bit of those together. Sap green and ochre. We already had a little puddle mixed. We're going to bring that together. So we do want that grass to be coming from our grass at the side. So we're just going to pull that together so that it doesn't look like it's just sitting out there in the open. And if you like, you can use your card again and just make a few more little marks of grass, just to give a little more texture. So we're mixing and matching some colors here. We still have that nice soft green and ochre color that when we mix them together. And we're going to move up to the next line. So again, I'm going to draw a line of that soft green and ochre blend. And with my brush, I'm going to start to pull that color up. And I'm staying within that line. I want to stay on the right-hand side of it. I'm not trying to go past this line. And then I can start to add in some deeper greens here and there, just like I did here. I'm putting in a little bit of deeper green. And my ochre. So I'm blending some colors right on the canvas. And I'm just adding a few dots of fresh color of sap green, just fresh dots, because I'm going to use my credit card again, and I'm going to do some grasses. So you can see just by pulling up, sometimes it's leaving a little bit of a white mark. That's okay. We're just looking for a clump of grass. And remember, they don't all go the same way. Some cross over, some are shorter, some are taller. And again, I'd like to add in that fresh ochre just for a pop of color, just here and there. It just adds to a little bit of the brightness in the picture. And we have another clump of grass over on the left-hand side. We haven't addressed this area. So pretty much the same process we've been through. We're going to do some strokes of green, and that green comes right up to the trees. We have one tree that's fairly tall, that's in the foreground, but we can still paint that tree. So I've got some sap green I'm putting on there. I've got some hooker's green I'm painting on there. And we've got that little line coming out in the front. Another little line that comes out to the front. So we'll give that a look of grass. Just that little path, part of the path. So we'll come back and do some work on the edges. So we'll come back and do some work on the edges, but at this point we're just filling in where our grass is sitting. And I'll add a little bit of ochre, but it's not quite as much ochre on this side. We'll add a little bit in there. Just let that blend in with the other colors. Just helps to create the opening of our forest. And we can see by the picture the finished picture that there's quite a bit of dark in that forest, and we will come back and put that dark in. But we're just building the base to start with. So it's just step by step, a little bit at a time. So basically we're looking for lights and darks of greens and different tones, absolutely. So we're just doing the base, the floor, or the grasses when you walk through a forest. We're just creating that. Now we have a line on our picture. There is a line down below, and we're going to create the look of some of that path just by using ochre. So you can see I'm just tapping my brush on. I'm not even painting it. I'm just tapping the brush. And I'm just very gently in the center, very lightly, but I'm just covering over where that line is so that we have a visual space in our mind where we can see where the leaves would have fallen from the trees and where the path is leading us. And at the top part of that path, on the one side, we're just going to create another little vision of where the grass or moss is just growing in the path. So again, we'll come back and we'll do some more texture on the edges, and we'll put some more texture on that ground, making it look a little more rocky. But at this point, we are almost at half time, so I'm going to read our card. So our card, this is an inspiration card. It says, take a time out today and treat yourself to an energetic pick-me-up. When you recover or discover something that nourishes your soul and brings joy, care enough about yourself to make room for it in your life. So take time out today and treat yourself to an energetic pick-me-up. When you recover or discover something that nourishes your soul and brings joy, care enough about yourself to make room for it in your life. So now I think we're ready to start on some of these trees. We have our sky in the background. Let's find our trees, and we're working with brown or raw umber. If I start with my first tree, they're fairly narrow trees, and this one actually is leaning forward a little bit into the opening. I'm leaving that white opening. There's my tree. My trees are wider at the bottom than they are at the top. And beside that, we have another tree. And they don't have to be perfectly straight. If this is difficult for you, you don't have a steady hand, this is a perfect project because it doesn't have to be a straight standing tree. Trees are not straight. They have lots of bends unless they're coming from a nursery. They have lots of bends and wiggles in them and marks. We'll just carry on with our trees. We've got a third tree, and you see that the grasses are coming up a little bit higher. So the trees are sitting behind the grasses. So again, I'm just using raw umber. They're coming down to the grasses. And if some of your trees are lighter or darker, that's okay. We will do a little bit of lifting off and change some of the looks of our trees. We'll lighten up some of the bark and darken in some other areas. And don't worry about your trees being perfect. That's not what this class is all about. This is about getting the color on, trying some new techniques, seeing what works for you, seeing whether or not over time you may discover that you have different ways of painting than other people, and that's your unique artistic ability coming out. So you can see some are lighter and some are darker. And we'll go to this last tree, and this last tree comes all the way down, right down to the top of that ochre. So we've got some nice bright in front of it. You can see they have different dimensions, a little bit lighter, a little bit darker, a little bit heavy in some spots, heavier looking. Now, in order to give these trees the look of bark, if I take my brush and put it into wet, just clear water, and rinse it and just tap it dry on the paper towel. I'm not trying to get all the water off, but I'm working with a damp brush. So while I'm working with that damp brush, I'm going to start to pull on my tree. Again, into the water, tap it off. I just want a damp brush, and I'm going to pull lightly, and you'll see that that paint has no choice but to move. The paint will lighten and give a different dimension to the look of your trees. So you see I've got a little bit, it looks like a little bit of bark in there, a little bit of difference of color. I'm going to leave that. I like that. And so I can do that. I don't have to do that with all of the trees, but I can do that with this darker one in the center. I can just rub my brush along and it will pick up some of the paint and give a different look to my tree trunk. So even in the center of this one that's a little bit darker, I can lift some of that paint off in spots, just change the look. It's got a little bit of, it looks like a little bit of a stump there on my tree. I'm going to leave that. I like that. And you don't have to do all of your trees, or if you want to try it on all your trees, go right ahead. It's an interesting process lifting off. You can leave one side dark and the other side lighter. If you want, you can paint the look of a knot in the center of your tree just by lifting off some paint. And so have some fun with this, because this is what makes watercolor so interesting. And we'll move over to the other side, again with raw umber, and we'll paint these trees at the other side, starting with the first one on the inside, coming all the way down So if you're stressing over trying to get the perfect tree, being in line, following every angle, it's not a necessity, because trees have different shapes, different markings. And by lifting off, we can adjust that as well. So tree number 1. And tree number 2, which is a little bit smaller. And you can see, I just use my pinky finger to rest on the canvas where I can find a dry spot. And it just helps to give a little bit of steadiness. And if you have a little mark like that, where I've got a little bit, I've put a little bit of brown in the middle, or it's not completely perfect over here, we are going to put leaves and branches on these trees. So a lot of what you might think is important to cover up is going to already be covered by branches and leaves. And if you find you're getting stressed while you're doing this, remember back at the beginning when I took those 3 deep breaths and just let go, gave myself a smile. Don't take yourself so seriously. Don't take your art so seriously. It's just a piece of paper. This is being recorded, so if you do want to repeat it, the recording will be available so you can do it again on your own time with another piece of paper, another piece of art. So now I'm going to lift off again, just in a few spots, just using a damp brush. Just lifting off here and there. So I'd like to give some of these trees some branches. I'm using my brown, my raw umber, and I'm just going to sporadically here and there, just give some branches coming from the trunk of the tree. Just a few. It's interesting, you see a hair staring at you. That's cool. And so we're just going to do a few branches coming from the trees. And they're not necessarily planned, they're just random, just put in there. They will show up. They'll leave if you put too many in or you're not happy with the ones that you put on. When we put the greenery on there, when we put the leaves on there, you can cover some of those up if you like. So again, that's the beauty of watercolor, is that you can cover things over. You can lighten it up if you need. If I wanted to take one of these off, or lighten it up just by using a damp brush, if I want to lighten that up, I can actually take it and almost it's disappeared. It's just blended right into the tree. So I've made that lighter just by using a dampened brush. So now I'm going to start to put some greenery on. I'm going to work with Hooker's green to start. I'm using a number 3 pointed brush, and I'm just going to start putting marks on my canvas. So it looks like they're all going in the same direction. I don't necessarily want them to go in the same direction, so I'm going to shift my brush and point it a different way. So I was working this way, now I'm working this way. If you find you're patterning and doing exactly the same thing over and over, you can turn your canvas upside down, or if you turn your brush, come from a different angle, you'll find you'll get a little bit of a change. So this might look a little bit kindergartenish right now. We were just in the starting stages. We're just popping on the background look of some leaves. And you can still see that brown, those leaves or the branches that we put on. The branches are still showing up. So that's Ochre green on the one side. Now I'm going to move to the other side, and I'm going to do the same process again, moving my brush around, moving my wrist if that's difficult for you, and then just try to lightly alter the direction that the paint's going. So that was Ochre green. And now I'm going to switch to say a sap green. So I'm going to do the same process, and I may do it on top of another leaf. I may do it beside, in front, but I'm looking for a variation of color in my trees. And I'm moving over to the other side, doing the same thing with the same color, sap green. So I have 2 different colors of green in there. My trees don't look as full as I would like. At the base of the trees on the left-hand side, I'm going to add some ochre. So that's my yellow mixed with brown, my ochre. So I want a little bit of brightness there. And we're still mixing and matching colors. So I'm mixing sap green. If you just have green, that's fine, with ochre or with yellow. I'm coming up with that olivey color. I have that olivey color on the floor of my picture. I also want it to be up at the top of my picture and with a bigger brush. So I've switched to my number 6. So the strokes are going to look a little bit different, a little bit more full, a little bit heavier. And if they start to blend with some of my other colors that are there, I'm okay with that. It's going to add to the picture. So again, that's sap green and ochre mixed together. And I'm just starting to pop that in just to fill the look of the tree. Just give it a little bit more depth. So I can still see the trees and the trunks in the background, but I've got some nice leaf coverage on my trees. And if you find you're losing some of that, you can go ahead and just pop in a little bit of extra color in between. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. So it's filled in a little more. And it's okay to leave a gap if you like in between. It doesn't have to be every single inch covered. And with that same color that I made, that mixture of sap green and ochre, if you've still got some left on your canvas or on in your paint tray, sap green and ochre, I'm going to start to build up on the right-hand side, a little bit taller, just come right into my trees, just using my brush. So it's quite full on the right-hand side. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. I'm going to bring that color up. I'm going to use a little bit darker green. I'm going to use a little bit of the hooker's green. And I'm just going to bring that up into the trees. So the bottom part should be drier. So pulling some of that color from the bottom up, just using the fresh color, it will sit on top of that color as well and give a nice different depth. And if you like, you can use your credit card and pull some of the leaves up. Just give a nice stripe look. Some of that fresh color that you put on. I'd like to add a little bit of ochre in between these trees, going in an upward motion that looks like there's some trees or something in behind them on the left-hand side. Still working with that ochre. I'm going to make a nice bright spot in the center. Just pull that brightness in so it looks like a little bit of sunlight is coming in. And then whatever blue you used, I used a cobalt blue. That's my blue. And if I take my green and mix those together, a little bit more blue, I'm looking for a dark color. And with a smaller brush, with this dark color, so this is a blue color mixed with your green. I'm going to start to create some shadows in my forest. So it looks like I put black on there, but it's not. That is blue and green mixed together. That's the same blue in your sky and the same green you've done some of your grasses with. So don't be afraid to put the dark on, because the dark will make everything else seem brighter. So we're creating some shadows in the grasses, and even at the base of the trees, we're creating a little bit of a shadow just by using that blue and the green mix. I'm also going to use the same blue, just with little dots at the base just at the base where my grasses are. I can put a little bit of shadowing in there, but I want that at the base. So it looks like little pebbles. And I'm going to do the same down below. I'm going to put some little pebbles in here, just little tiny dots. Not to overdo it, but what I want is the look of some rocks or pebbles. And I'm also going to use this dark color for my edge. I'm going to do that on both sides. So we could spend all day adding a little bit of dark, a little bit more trees, lightening up, putting in a little bit more golden colors in places. If you want a little bit of golden here and there in your trees, just where the sun might be coming through, then you're certainly welcome to do that. Put in a little bit of brightness here and there. But that's what you can do in 1 hour. We all started with the same piece of paper. We all started with a white piece of paper with a few lines on it, and that's what we've created. So be proud of your accomplishments. And let's sign our art somewhere on in your artwork. Put your initials or put whatever you use as your signature. And I hope you enjoyed that and learned a few little tips and tricks and different things to do, and about moving your wrist from right to left, or moving your brushes so that your branches and your leaves all don't look the same. But practice this and try it at home. And one of the best things about learning how to paint, you'll never have to buy a card again. You can make your own cards now. So, and receiving a handmade gift from somebody, especially if they painted it with you in mind, is such a wonderful gift. So be proud of your accomplishments, and don't compare yours to other people. Everybody paints different. Everybody sees things different. If I put the two side by side, they're going to look a little bit different. That's the two. So one's a little bit darker than the other one. So, you know, I never create exactly the same thing twice. That, you know, you certainly are a great group. Thank you so much for supporting. Kudos for having the courage to come on board and to hold up your pictures and to try something new. So good for you. Thank you